Okay. Hi again to anyone who's listening at this at a later point in time. So, plan for today is go over the homework that you handed in and then go over some new stuff, mainly conditionals, loops, and functions, three core building blocks. But before we go to that, I will first go over homework together with you. And for this, I set up something that everyone who ever did data science in the past already knows. The other ones will see it now. This is what is called a Jupyter Notebook. This basically is an editor that allows for me to either write regular texts, like I did up here, in Markdown style, to anyone who knows Markdown, all the people who might use Obsidian, stuff like that, they know Markdown, but also to actually write and execute code. So if you look at this here, this is exactly what I gave you as homework for today. And I can also just execute that code by just clicking in there, pressing enter. And now, of course, it gives me an error, the error that all of you experienced up until today. And now I will line by line go over that code together with you and put in all the stuff, also as some form of recap from what we did last session. Task one would be create a variable called name and assign your name to it. Someone wants to tell me how stuff is assigned, a name, a string is, what the symbols for a string are. Just shout in, whoever wants to.
I think you have to, like you wrote the ist gleich sign,
Equal, yeah.
and then you have to put the name you want to assign in quotation marks.
Quotation
So
marks, exactly.
I did like Eileen in there.
Okay, I will just use yours for now. Thank you. Yes, so a string, just a recap from last session, is consisting of individual characters, and all of that is encapsulated in quotation marks. You can either do the German version or the English version of quotation marks. It doesn't matter, but just stick to the same. Okay, right now, if I then, you see right now the error is at line 14 where it cannot even print name. If I now rerun it, it no longer complains about that line of name, but it only complains about the line after, the one of age. So it already prints out the name Eileen. Next one, create a variable called age and assign your age to it. So I will create one that's called age, and I will assign, how is a number written?
You just need to write the number without anything, without quotation marks or something, just,
okay,
yeah, the
perfect.
digits.
And I'm just 18 years young. It prints that, that works. Next one, create a variable called is_student and assign a Boolean value to it, indicating whether you're a student, yes or no. How do Booleans look like? How are they written?
I think you just have to write true or false with capital letters.
Exactly. So I will do false. This is important. I've seen that in some people's homework where they write false or true within quotation marks. This is not correct. The system just knows false or true without that. Otherwise, it would have been a string, and it does not evaluate to either to a Boolean value. Okay, that one works. I will actually change your name so your name is not forever in there. That underscore dude. Okay, next variable. Create a variable called grades and assign a list of your grades. How does a list look like?
you have like eckige brackets. I don't know
Exactly.
what is not the round ones.
I think it's just called brackets, right?
Just brackets, okay.
I think so. Anyone correct me. I'm not a native English speaker.
And
But
yeah, then you put
Word
what you
bracket.
want inside, and you do a comma between the
yes, yes,
yeah
that is correct.
things.
Generally speaking, quickly, anyone give me a recap on lists? What is the important part about lists?
Maybe that the counting in um, uh, is different. Like you start with a 0 and
Yes, that is generally true for anything that is computer related. So if I were to print name and then the 0, that also works, as you see, with a string. So it also prints that one as 0. But that is correct. Generally speaking, the counting is off by 1 for normal people. I wanted to go to in a list, the order matters. It is like what I mentioned last time, the Perlenschnur, where it's like pearl after pearl after pearl in one. What is the English term for Halskette?
Necklace.
Necklace. Thank you very much. Okay, as I've seen, every one of you has only ever, or most of you have only ever written grades 15 and above. Therefore, I will stick to the overall grade scheme. And I will also add in the 18. Just for general recap, a list can also can contain more than just numbers. Can also contain strings. Can even contain other lists. So I could even have something that's called a nested list. So I can have a list within a list. Just so you have seen it. Does not matter for that one. Okay, I have that that list of grades. Next, create a variable called course and assign a tuple. Did I skip over what a tuple is last time? There's a good chance I did.
I think
Because
so because I
time is
was
running low. Yeah.
I was confused. So
Okay. How did you solve it?
I just did the list.
You just did what? Sorry.
A list.
Okay. Tuple, generally speaking, is something that is written with parentheses then. I think in English, the round ones are parentheses, while the eckige brackets, as I will refer to them from now on, are just brackets. Now the tuple is something that is generally, wait, now I have to look it up. I'm confused now. What is a tuple? Sorry, I have to do that every now. Python tuple. Tuple are used to store multiple items in a single variable. Oh, they are unchangeable. This is the important part about them. Sorry, I should have known that. I just need to look stuff up again and again. So this one cannot be changed. Course and assign a tuple of your favorite subjects to it. I've seen Strafe, I will just do as a person with decent manners, just do okay. I also like Strafe. Okay, running that again, I see the next error only occurs in task 6, which is create a variable called student underscore info and assign a dictionary with keys name, age, student, and grades to it. Anyone tell me what the dictionary is? Just really quick, one sentence.
it connects two things with each other. So you can ask for the left side of the dictionary thing and it tells you the right side.
Perfect. This is basically what it is. I mainly use it as something like a lookup table. There's like keys and values. So if the first key is name, then name would be that dude again. Next one would be age. Be what is he? 18. Is underscore student. It's false. And grades. Grades will be a list with, what does he have? I will just copy some of these from above. And I see I no longer get the red border on the left, but everything's blue and everything's printed. Therefore, this was the homework. Everything clear? Great. Love to see it. Thank you very much for your feedback here. Okay, if there's any question, reach out, but this is just like the basics. Now, what will we do today with all of these basic data types? We will go over three things for today. These three, which would be conditionals, loops, and functions. Now, first things first, I will teach you what all of these mean, if you were to translate it. Therefore, I will, wait, I need to get rid of the other one below. That was just me playing around. Conditionals. Conditionals refers to what people would know as if statements. I think most of you have heard that word in the past, at least. An if statement generally means I check for something. And if that something is true, then something happens. That one will be marked down. I will create, sorry, I'm also a bit unfamiliar with Jupyter Notebooks and just doing it live. Generally meaning if I have this value that I call x, and x is equal to 5, I can then check if, let's say, x is bigger than 0, if this statement here evaluates to true. So if this is correct, then do something. Print it. Did you see the mistake I made here? What I did here? The first one to yell in.
In quotation marks, in quotation marks.
Yeah, that's correct. Therefore, generally, if you are an English speaker, most people just use the German quotation marks. Well, I know a lot of people that just use the German quotation marks for the outside of strings, because the English ones you actually use within your text. You can also do a thing that's called escaping, where you just say the next character does not really count. So we say if that x is bigger than 0, it's bigger than, then it should print it's bigger than 0. And if I now let that run, as I have set the x at the beginning to 5, meaning bigger than 0, it should print, yes, what it does, it prints out it is bigger than 0. If I were to change the x to -2 and rerun the thing, it no longer prints that, as this statement, x bigger than 0, no longer evaluates to true. Likewise, that means as long as this thing here evaluates to true, I can also do a lot of other things that would evaluate to true. I could even just type in true. If true. And if I say if true, that is always true, because if true is true, that is about as true as it gets. So let's stick with that for now. That concept understood? Good. Generally, I mentioned that in the last time, there's things that are called truthy or falsy. Things that are generally, if they are evaluated, they are seen as true or as false. So an empty string, for example, that is just call it y, and it is just an empty string. And if I ask if y, it would not print that, because an empty string is seen as somewhat false. But if I put something in there, it now does that again, because it evaluates to a truthy value. Oh, there's a comment.
But why is it just truthy in this case and not true?
Because technically there is something. Now, y exists. There is a variable that is called y. And if exists is generally, it's more than just zero or false. Therefore, these are seen to be very close to falsy, because although there is something, it's basically just empty. If that makes sense, it's kind of a weird one. But like the value 0 or an empty string are very close to just the Boolean value false. Therefore, they would evaluate to falsy because they are close to false, but not directly the Boolean value false. Is that confusing? It might be. Okay, I will leave this as x equals 0, just so this is understood then from if you look at this at a later point in time. Now, I can also say insert below something that is called, wait, I have to put a comment up there. It's just called an if statement. There's also something called an if-else statement. And an if-else statement is check for something, and if that something is correct, do that, else do something different. So if I say there's this value, now we call it actually called y, and we say y is -2, and now we can check for if y is bigger than 0, then print me. Here you go. And if this is not correct, I could say else print it has to be 0 or below. So whenever the first one does not evaluate to true, then that else thing is triggered. Meaning if I now run that thing, it tells me it has to be 0 or below. It's like either do that or do the other thing. And to make it more confusing, there's also something in between that is called an if, elif, or else statement. Now, take another value. Let's just call it Z for now, and Z is make it set it to 0. Now I can say if that Z value would be bigger than 0, then print it is positive. Elif eine weitere, further condition, 0 is smaller than 0. Print is negative. Else it has to be 0. Now, what you see here is this typical if, elif, or else statement. This is evaluated from top to bottom. First one is if Z is bigger than 0, then it would print it is positive. Right now, our Z is 0. Therefore, the next line is elif, meaning that stands for else if, andernfalls wenn. So if that is true, then it does that. If that the first one is not true, but the second is true, then it would do that. And only if these two are not correct, it would then do what is written in the else. So elif stands for else if I further check. And if I run that, it now tells me that it goes through the first two without any success, and then it comes to only then it comes to the else. Understood? Great. Then you have already understood one of the most important parts about programming. A word about coding style in Python. I have seen that again and again in the past from Leon, who does a lot of code in Python that is typical for Python, meaning brackets, colon, colon, something. This is a typical way to write code only in Python, not in other languages, or in very little other languages. This is cool if you know how to do it, but most code that you do in practice, you can do with the very basic things that I teach you now. You do not need to know the specifics of Python for that. Therefore, even if your code, as long as your code runs and it does not generate any bugs, it is usually, at least in practice, more valuable to me if I can just take a look and understand what it's doing, besides that code being as tech or as short written as you possibly can. Sorry, Leon, I know your code is really nice, but generally just understanding code is also something that is very valuable. And doing these if, elif, and else things is something that I see every day. That makes sense to use that a lot of times in programming. Okay, and this is the concept of conditionals at its very top level. Is that all clear? Luckily, I see at least Pia
All
nodding.
clear.
Perfect. Great. Then I will move on to the next part. This is called loops. I will insert a cell below and I will turn it into a markdown cell. Now, loops come in two different forms. Loop generally meaning, if you think of a looping, is something that goes again and again and again until you tell it to no longer do that. Therefore, your machine can basically execute code until forever. I will also show you that in a second. Two types of loops. One of them being the for loop. The other one being the while loop. insert cells below. Sorry, I'm still not used to running doing stuff in Jupyter Notebook. It will get better over time. First thing, we will do the for loop. Insert cells below. You are markdown, you are markdown, perfect. The for loop is something that goes again and again until a certain point is reached. Meaning, if I were, and this is a classic case, to give it a list, now I would say these are the numbers that I use. And numbers is a list that goes from 1 to 5. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now I want to go over each of these numbers in the list, and I want to just print it. I could do for each number in numbers, print that each number. And if I let that run, it should now go over all of them and print me all of them. And it does exactly that. You can also, I'll just copy that. Do the same thing with a string, as a string technically works the same way as a list. Let's call it name, and that name, oops, again is mine. Let's just call it badge dude. For each letter in name, print that letter. And now it goes over each of the individual characters of that name, and it performs the same action. I can also, and this is a very typical thing to do in Python. The other languages do the same thing. It's just not as pretty. I can do for a variable I only create now. I would say I in range 10. I will explain what it does in a second. Print I. I can say for a variable that I call I within range. Range is something that is Python inbuilt. Range of 10, meaning from 0 to 10, print that I. And if I do that, it goes over all the individual steps from 0 to in that case 9, and prints that individual number out for you. This is something if you just want to do something 10 times. I will comment that above. Do something 10 times. Then you would do that like that in Python. Other languages have the same feature built in, but it's not as nice as in Python. There's very long things you would do in, for example, JavaScript, but that one in Python, it's really, really quick to do. Generally speaking, the first thing here, like this each number, is a variable that you define yourself within that loop. Like above there's numbers. This is something that I predefined. But then if I go over it, I name each of these individual ones. I just name them each number. I could also name them somehow different. I could also just say each letter could also just be character. And then I print out that character. Meaning I just tell my machine that I want to have a variable that is called character that I can then utilize inside of that loop. Is that clear? Perfect. I'm so happy to have both Aline and Pia there where I could see visual feedback because I never know if it's confusing otherwise. Okay, then I think also the concept of the for loop should be clear. Is that right? Great. I mean, there will be a lot of practice involved now, but I just wanted to give you that concept. You do something for a finite amount of times, and that amount of times is defined by, be it a list, be it a string, or be it just a range. Good. Then we will do the other loop. That is the while loop. Now the while loop works technically a bit different. I will showcase it. I will just say there's a counter. And that counter is set to 0. And now I say while counter is smaller than, let us say,
I
100.
think you misspelled counter the first time. You forgot the.
Thank you very much. Now I say while counter is smaller than 100, I print out the counter. And if I now were to run that code, it would run indefinitely. Because right now I say counter is 0, and I check if the counter is smaller than 100, it prints that, and then it does that again. It again checks, is the counter still smaller than 100, which it is because I only set it to 0. It does it again. I will now run it. I have to kill the terminal in a second, I think. Yes. As you see, oh, my computer is now bugging. I cannot move shit. Stop. Stop. Please, stop. Stop it. Stop that thing. I need to reload the page. Now, what you have now seen in action is, oh, nice, it did not save everything, is an infinite loop. My computer did that again and again for as quickly as it could execute that code. Therefore, there were like most likely a couple of million executions of that loop. Therefore, I mean, yeah, nice that you see it now. I need to now recreate what I just did. Insert cells below. Luckily, I have my cheat sheet here. Now we said while count is smaller than 100, it should just do that. But in order to break out of that loop, you would also give it some form of condition where it actually can reach that goal of, let's say, 100. So I would also do count plus equals 1, or that is the same as if I were to write, wait, this is the same as if I did count equals count plus 1, just so you've seen it. So every time that thing runs, it prints out its current count, and then it adds 1. And for shortness sake, I will not put it to 10, and now have that one run. And it only does that. Right now you see every time it goes over it, and then as soon as it hits 9 and adds 1 up, then actually counts at 10 and that no longer evaluates to true. Therefore, then it stops. And that is a while loop. Generally speaking, I will also add this as a comment. If you want something to run forever, if something is meant to run forever, you while true. If you just type while true colon, that code runs forever. There is actually code that should run forever. Just not what I wanted to show you.
Do
Okay.
you have an example for code that is meant to run forever?
Yes.
Where would you use it?
Generally speaking, a lot of code on the internet is meant to run forever. Each server, for example, the server should always be up. The server should always be listening. Therefore, there is code that is always up and running, always listening for any input that might come its way. It is not exactly built like that, but code, a lot of code should run forever. Or also, like, your operating system on your machine should run for as long as you want it to. It is up for a very long time, depending on your performance on the machine, of course. You can also do that, by the way, just so you've seen it, the other way around. You can also start with a high number and then subtract things from it. Or you can also add in, for example, characters to a string and then check for how long is that string already. So there's a couple of different ways to play around with this. But this is just like the most common way to express a while loop. Is that all clear? Great. Then for the last thing that I wanted to give you for today, that is what is called a function. Okay, cells below. Markdown. Functions generally are a piece of code that you can execute to have it do something. Something that you define yourself. I will show you what I mean by that. I can say, I define myself a function. I call that function, so I define myself, therefore I use this keyword def, and then I just type in the name of the function. Let's just say this function is there. This is a thing that I use to greet someone. So I call that greet function. And the function is always then followed by parentheses. And then I call, and then I tell it what it should actually do. And it should say print, hi there, nice to meet you. And now with that, I have defined something, this function called greet, that I can then call, meaning I just use that function. You have done that again and again. I will show you in a second. I can then just say greet with the parentheses. And every time I type greet with parentheses, it then does that. If I greet again and again, it does that 3 times. Now also what you have done in the past when you typed print and then parentheses is also you just called a function print, and that function is only there to then give back to you whatever you handed it in. So within these parentheses. Because you can also have a function, my sum function. This is a function that is meant to add stuff together. Let us say this function takes stuff in from you, information in from you. Let's just call them in value A, value B. And this function then prints value underscore A plus value underscore B. And I can now call that function my sum function with the values of, let's say, 145 and minus 10. And if I do that, I pass in the values 145 and minus 10 to that thing. And that thing is meant to then perform an action on what I handed in. These things in here are based on if you define it or if you call it, either called, God damn it, my brain is melting at this point of the day, are either called arguments or arguments or, wait, I have to look it up. I'm just tired. Parameters. Parameters are arguments. So I call that function with the arguments of 145 and 10, while I define it with the parameters. There's people who actually take are like, if you have ever hear the words that are basically the same thing, but parameters is the one and arguments is the other. The one way you define it, the other one way you call it with. And what the print function does, it just returns to you the string that you pass in there as an argument. Therefore, you basically are familiar with using functions or calling functions, but now you should also be aware of how you define a function. That might have been a bit too quick from my side, a bit confusing. Is that somewhat clear what I mean by that? You can define a piece of code that you can then later evoke again and again. And that can either do something just standalone, or you can pass something in as a parameter, and then it executes something on the parameters that you pass in. Perfect. Also something that you should have already heard just for now, you do not need to do that for now, is a function can also return something. So it can give you something back. Now this function here does not print anything. Unlike all the other functions that you've seen in the past, this one does not print, but this one only gives back. Therefore, I can now say, I run that return test, and I assign that to a variable, my number. My number is return underscore tests with 10 and 20. And then I print that number. And if I do that, that number, that variable, is filled with that return value from the function above. And then, therefore, this one should then print whatever is returned from the function, which luckily it does. Just so you heard something, heard it for now, you will not need that either in the homework or, yeah, maybe next session. But functions do not only ever print stuff, but they most likely, a lot of functions in practice return stuff back to you. Okay, and with that, I think that was all the materials that I needed to teach you for today. these are three very important concepts that you need to understand. One of them being how do if else or if else statements work in Python. The other one being how do loops work. We looked at the for loop and we looked at the while loop. And then how do I define a function and how do I call a function? This should all be clear for now. Great. P is nodding, that is good. Eileen, if you're saying something, you're muted.
I nodded too. I try to.
Okay. As I am a very nice teacher, I also have some homework for you that I already uploaded to GitHub. So if you were to do a git pull, you will see there is now within session 1_1_0, there is a new homework for all of you. That homework consists of 3 tasks. The first 2 are something that you should be able to do rather simple. The third one is something that I think all of you can do, and also something that is a typical interview question in coding if you're going for a coder job. This is a classic. It's on the simpler side, but it's a classic. Therefore, go as far as you can. I would expect that pretty much all of you can do the task 1 and task 2. Task 3, I'm curious to see who of you can solve it. Generally speaking, if you hand something in, please do it by the schema of the number of the session, meaning in that case, that session is 110, and then underscore your name. Then I can see whose homework that is. I think that would be best. Okay, then I will stop the recording.